Hello, Meri Williams. Welcome to the DevOps Diaries podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. Meri, really excited to talk to you today about engineering culture and creating culture in organizations that can be really impactful and really empowering to not just leaders, but to employees that are in your teams as well. And something that you very graciously presented to us at DevOps Dream in London, which is run by Gearset, which was an amazing talk. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on to DevOps Diaries and talk to us a little bit about this topic. One of the key things for me that I took away from that, you dived into a whole bunch of things, but the first thing that I wanted to talk about, and something that I'm quite passionate about as well, is one of the closing comments that you had, and closing areas about making cultural change real. And that is culture add being more important than culture fit. Why is that from your experience, and what does that mean?
So I think there's a huge amount of evidence that shows that diverse teams outperform homogenous teams, right? So they're more innovative, they're more profitable, they're more likely to solve really challenging problems. And so I think that the trap we fall into when we think too much about culture fit, and I'm not saying that you don't want someone who will fit well with your team. I'm just saying that you don't want somebody who only fits well with your team. And so I encourage people to, instead of asking, do I like how they fit, which often means, will I like going to the pub with them or something like that, rather than, are they going to be a brilliant colleague? Ask, what are they going to add to the team? What are they going to add to our culture? And I think you get much more interesting hiring choices, but you also get much more interesting teams if everybody has been added knowing, they bring this amazing focus on testability. This person's really great at the pixel perfect quality of the front end. This person's just so passionate about customers. We have to have them on our team because it's going to help our entire team be more customer centric. I think when you've got a collection of people like that and you bring them into a team, you can make the best of what they're great at a lot easier.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Not just about skill sets that somebody might have acquired, but you mentioned that passion and drive, where somebody is passionate about making customers successful, which is a fantastic trait, and every business needs those people, especially over maybe over somebody that has that fine detail minutia of UX or particular hard skills. You mentioned that kind of passion for customers, and you've touched on some of the hard skills that folks might have. But what about people's personal backgrounds in terms of diversity and inclusion? How does that play into building part of that team as well?
One of my favorite examples of this is we had an engineer when I was at Monzo who was the first engineer to join our savings team who had a family. And the rest of the savings team were like, why would anybody want to lock their money up? Like, that doesn't make sense to us. We just don't understand. Why would you put your money in for 3 months or 6 months or 12 months? Who even wants that? And this engineer, she was like, I'm saving for my kids to go to university. I don't want to touch that money. Of course it's fine to lock it up if I get a better return. And I think that's a really super specific example of how that different background and different life somebody has lived can make a difference, both to how well you can empathize with your potential customer, but also in the solutions that you come up with or the different things that you care about. And I think people talk a lot about diversity of thought, and I think having people who think differently is valuable, but people who are different is even more valuable. So I think having whether it's folks from different countries, the language that you speak so affects the way that you think. I'm multilingual, and I definitely think in a very different way when I'm thinking in Afrikaans than when I'm thinking in English.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those things layer up and add up to such richness that we're missing out on otherwise in a lot of cases.
Yeah. I've had the pleasure of working with quite a few South African folk, and I've always really enjoyed working with South Africans. What do you think it is about South Africans that make you such a joy to work with?
So I say that we are, sort of jokingly, I say that we're very direct and then mildly apologetic about it, and that's because we had 300 years of Dutch rule and then 100 years of British rule, right? So the very direct we got from the 300 years of British Dutch rule, and then the mildly apologetic from the 100 years of. So we'll say things like, that shirt looks terrible on you. I'm sorry. I felt like I had to say something. That's a very like Sappho thing to say. So I think it's this sort of disarming mix of being quite cheerful but then being very direct at the same time. Tends to be what people like about us.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely agree with that. You appreciate that directness, but especially as somebody who is a Brit as well, you know that you never go anywhere without somebody apologizing. You know, apologizing for something that is innocuous or probably shouldn't be um, apologi- um, apologized for.
Apologize for, yeah.
Yeah. S- talking about hiring for a culture ad, and those individuals that bring certain qualities to a team. What's what's your advice for team members that are entering a team, whether they're in leadership positions or as another just team member? I don't want to say that just team member makes it sound like not valuable, but you obviously, of
Yeah.
course, you are. How do you bring your best self to work as an employee?
I think a lot of it starts with the team. I think if they can create the psychological safety for you to be yourself, then that matters a lot. And I think that when people are thinking about whether they will join a team, will stay in a team, will say yes to a promotion, they're asking themselves three questions. They're asking, am I expected here? Is there anybody who's like me, who's meant to be here? Like, are they even planning for someone like me to be here? And so that can be small things like, are there non-alcoholic drinks in the fridge as well as alcoholic ones? It can be much bigger things. It can be, is there a prayer room? If you're someone who needs to pray multiple times a day, then if there isn't any mention of prayer rooms or anything like that, then they're probably not expecting someone like you to work there in the first place, right? I think there's then a second question, which is, am I respected? Are my differences going to be seen as a feature or a bug? And then
Mm,
the last one, which I really like, is, can I be myself and be successful here? And I think that last piece is about how much time you and energy you have to spend pretending to be something that you're not. And so I think that in an ideal world, everybody would be like, yeah, I was expected here. I feel respected. My differences are features, and I can be myself and succeed. But the reality is that the people who can say yes to all three of those questions tend to be the people who are in the majority, right? So they tend
mhm,
to be the ones who, of course, they're expected because they can see there's loads of people like them already there. Their differences aren't very different, so they're unnoticed, if anything. And then they've got plenty of evidence that someone like them can be successful because if they look at the senior leadership, it often looks pretty similar, right?
mm,
And so I think that what teams can do to make it better for a broader range of people is to um, try and show that all different kinds of people are expected, are respected, and can be themselves and be successful. So allowing space for people to be different and people to interact in different ways, to you know share the best things that have happened to them, but also the things that have shaped them. Um,
mm,
it's a little fuzzy, but I think that what a lot of what happens is at that immediate team level. Like hopefully you're in a company as well that encourages that diversity and equity and inclusion and has that sense of belonging for everybody. But at the base team level, it's about being able to give feedback and receive feedback. It's about feeling safe to voice your opinion, feeling that everybody around you is trying to do high quality work, same as you are. Um,
mm.
I think those kind of things are what are really important to someone. But I'd put a lot more of it on the team that you're joining than on the person who's different who is maybe joining a team. Because I think something that in the past has burned a lot of us out in tech especially is that if you're the one who's different, you're expected to change the environment around you. So now you have two jobs.
Right.
You've got your actual job you've got to do, and you've got to educate everybody around you about how to be inclusive and how to create space in which you can be your best self. And I think so. I put it more on managers and on the existing team to try and make it as friendly and inclusive as possible.
Yeah, yeah. That's something you mentioned just there as well, is having the confidence to share what has shaped you into the person you are. And that leads you into saying about like being open to receiving feedback and giving feedback and things like that. Often those things, what has shaped us, is often negative, well, negativity to some extent, but more challenging situations and things that I
Yeah.
think generally we're not very comfortable sharing, or because what has shaped us is supposed to be the successful things, and I found most often than not the things that have shaped me is the thing where I have been unsuccessful or where I have experienced some level of hardship that has had much more of an influence on me than what my successes have brought as well. Is there any kind of tips or some how do you create a safe environment for people to be vulnerable in that way?
So I think a lot of it is leaders showing that it's okay to be a bit vulnerable, to not to overshare, but to share, to say some stuff, to be open that this is a sad week because it's an anniversary of a grandparent dying, or those kind of things. And I think that you can't. I think anything where you try force people to share is kind of doomed, because if they don't feel safe, then they're just going to they're going to pick something that doesn't really matter. They're not going to really be vulnerable. It's not going to work. But I think the main thing that helps is just to, as a leader, be open and be earnest, and actually share some of how you're feeling, and when things are difficult, share that they're difficult. When you're talking about something and it reminds you of a tough period in the past, like, actually sometimes people want to hear about that, because then
Mm,
you've survived it. It's not always been your golden hour, like you say. We learn a lot more from when we fail than than anything
yeah.
else. um, but actually, I'm really lucky. The company I'm at now has a course called Authentic Leadership, and you go away residentially, and you're with a group, and they do a load of exercises to help you feel very close to this group you're a part of. And um, one of the exercises they do at a certain point shows you that how much you share really affects how close you feel to somebody. It's not necessarily about them sharing with you,
Mm,
but some of it can just be you being more open, draws people closer to you, even without them sharing anything at all. It's
yeah.
kind of fascinating.
That is fascinating. That is fascinating for sure. Speaking of sharing, or moving slightly on, like, but kind of on a similar kind of tangent to that. Um, you said in your talk during DevOps Dreaming that repetition is so key for people hearing you. Apparently, seven times you have to say something 7 times before people will understand or what you're saying or hear you. Um, and dry doesn't work.
Yeah,
What does that mean? What else can we do in our communication styles to help
yeah.
us build an effective culture?
Yeah, so I'm from a AI and a Python background, so I love don't repeat yourself. I love dry as a programming principle, but I think as a human comms principle, it's terrible. Because I think the first time you say something to someone, then they're receiving the idea. The second time, maybe they're remembering that you already said this once. The third time, they're like then starting to properly engage with the content, and it takes those fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh times before they'll be able to remember it themselves. Um, and so I think there's a couple of things. One is to try and be consistent in what you're saying. That doesn't mean be robotic. It doesn't mean like have a script and never deviate from it. But I think trying to be consistent in your word choice, and say the same things over and over again makes a big difference. And then just sometimes, like, I think as leaders we underestimate how much of our time should be spent communicating. I think we spend a lot of time figuring out the strategy. We spend a lot of time, making the plans, and then we don't spend anywhere near enough time at the end actually, like, communicating them effectively, making sure that people have time to ask questions, that they really get to understand. And so I think you can something that I think we do quite well at my current company, and we certainly did very well at Monzo, was to write proposals and then have it possible for a wide range of people to comment on them. And then when something is actually agreed, to come back with the sort of clean version of it and say, okay, we had all this debate, we had all these discussions, we considered all these options, here's what we actually decided. And this is the sort of architectural decision record of the decision that we made. And I love architectural decision records because I have had so many. I think I probably said in the talk I did, I worked on systems older than me. I've worked on systems so legacy they were vintage, right? Like old
They're
SAP
starting to smell.
systems. Yeah, exactly. They're almost quaint in how old they are. And you know, when you don't have access to the person who made the architectural decisions 25 years ago, you end up with some really interesting stuff to deal with, right? And
Yeah.
so architectural decision records that let you understand the context within which a decision was made and an architecture was chosen is so helpful. So I really like that form of technical communication of going like we're going to write down why we're doing what we're doing and what we considered at the time, and then you can go back to that when somebody in 3 years is like, why did they implement it this way, they can come back and be like, oh, they had all these constraints, that's why they did it this weird way. Are any of those constraints still relevant? No, they're all gone, so now we can just do it a much more sensible way. But that's a lot better than finding out that there was actually a really good reason they did it that weird way by replacing it with something that then doesn't work, which is often the case, right?
Absolutely, and Salesforce professionals, I really hope that you really took in what Meri just said, because documentation is one of the things that gets overlooked in pretty much every Salesforce implementation ever. I think that why did this decision get made? We don't know. This is just the way it is. Some consultant told us that this would be the best way to do it, so we did it that way. Or actually, consultant told us it was a good idea. We figured out ourselves it was a bad idea, and we did it this way. Why is our consultant now telling us that we should have done it this way? And all those kind of things. So I think that will have hit for quite a lot of people listening to this episode, for sure. In terms of management styles and not just documentation and communicating, there was something brilliant that you brought up. It was a tweet by Katarina Fake. There are three kind of managers: the shit umbrella, the shit funnel, and the shit fan. What do we want to be, we as managers, when it comes to the shit?
So I think the minimum viable manager is a bullshit umbrella. So tries to shield their people. I actually prefer Nick Means has a great talk where he talks about, rather than being you start to be like, you're a bullshit umbrella, but then does it need to be semi-transparent so people kind of know what's going on, but they're not too effective. Like it just gets into visual imagery you really don't want. And so he talks instead about it being a heat shield. Like, it's hot over there, but you're protected from it. And I think that's a really great way to do it. But you definitely don't want to be a shit funnel. Like, choose the person you least like and concentrate it all on them, or a shit fan, indiscriminately spread it around. And I think that minimum viable management is about protecting your team from shit that they shouldn't have to worry about. I think that the sort of more aspirational thing of management, though, is to try and create the space in which great work can happen. And I think that's having a mix of like purpose, so understanding why you're doing what you're doing and caring about it; autonomy, so feeling like you get a say and your opinion matters; mastery, you feel like you're getting better at what you do day by day; and then inclusion, that you feel like you belong and you've got that sense of community or similar around you. And I think that's probably a much harder, higher bar to put on managers, that they should be trying to create an environment in which all four of those things are true. But I think that's what we should really be aiming for.
Yeah. How do you assess that in the people that you manage then? Because as a CTO, I imagine the people that report to you are in themselves mostly people managers, or can be people managers as well.
Yeah.
How do you encourage the people that you manage to manage their people effectively?
So one is I share this framework around purpose, autonomy, mastery, and inclusion, and encourage them to reflect on, at the team level, where is their biggest opportunity. And it will vary a lot. Like, some teams, they're like, oh, our purpose isn't completely clear. We understand what the company's doing, but we don't understand how we fit into it. Like, that's something we should work on. Sometimes it'll be that teams feel like they're just being given milestones after milestones by the product manager, and they never get to have any say. They never get to talk about the tech debt that needs dealing with or whatever. That's an autonomy problem. When it's about the quality of the work or the craft personship, I think that's all about mastery. And then the more kind of sense of belonging, psychological safety is all about inclusion. In terms of how to measure it, we are lucky we have Peakon, so we do regular employee engagement surveys, and actually those kind of 4 areas show up in that to some extent. So there's obviously other categories like reward and recognition and those kind of things, but I keep an eye on how the managers are doing in their engagement scores. I keep an eye on how their DORA metrics are looking, so cycle time and throughput and time to first review and those kind of things, because at a team level you can really tell when a team is stuck. If they're going 7-8 days cycle time, it's like something's really wrong in this area. And then a lot of the training I give managers is all about figuring out what people need from you in the particular situation they're in. Because I think if somebody knows what they're trying to achieve, but they need to build some new knowledge or skills, they need something fundamentally different from you than if they have all the skills and the knowledge, but they don't know what to do next. Like in that second situation, they need a coach. In the first situation, they need someone to learn from. Like sometimes they know what they're doing and how to do it. Then they need a bulldozer and a cheerleader. Tell them they're great, get shit out of their way. And so I think it's that there's also this sense of being, a different, not a different manager, but showing a different side of your skill set depending on what an individual needs as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What do you think is the one thing that you would assess in somebody that they are ready to take that step as a manager, like that they're ready for that kind of first management role? They're a great engineer, or they're a great salesperson, or they're a great XYZ. What's kind of the one quality in a person that you think really identifies that they're going to be able to succeed, or they're ready for that challenge?
So the thing I most frequently see is that they become a really good coach or mentor. So they have an innate desire to help other people, and so they're motivated to get better at helping others, and they tend to either start coaching or mentoring other people before they become a line manager. And then I think um, the true test comes when there's the first really difficult conversations, because I think there are people who really want to help others, are really invested in helping people develop, but they don't want to or can't do the side of a manager role, which is also about some corrective feedback, about telling people, hey, that didn't look great. We need to work on this for you to keep doing well in the role. And so I've definitely seen some people try being a manager and then leave it again because they just found that the kind of difficult conversations and doing career planning with people and those kind of things, they just really, really struggled with it. But I think that there's room for that, right? We need staff engineers who are great communicators and good at developing people around them as well. Not everybody has to go into management, and not everybody should. But yeah,
Thank you.
train, I train managers, and the at the training I run is like a 1-day workshop, and one of the things I say is, I can teach you all the skills, but I can't teach you to care. And so I think that fundamental caring about people and wanting to help them do their best is something that you can't necessarily teach. I think that's a intrinsic motivation that people have.
Do you have to be selfless?
I don't think you have to be selfless, but being selfish is a problem. So
Right.
I think being a manager can be really, really rewarding. It is on a completely different feedback loop in terms of timing than being an engineer is, though, and or a salesperson. I think particularly to go from engineering to engineering management, you go from like I write some code, my tests pass or my tests fail, like dopamine, 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 right? To in the next 6 months, I will help this person move from A to B, I'll look back after 6 months and be really happy with the progress that they've made. And going from a event horizon of minutes or seconds to get that hit of dopamine of feeling like you've achieved something, to it being like 3 months, 6 months, a year before you'll really see it. I think you have to find ways to be motivated that are a little bit different than how we're used to when we're just shipping code and solving problems every day, right?
Yeah, no, that delayed gratification thing is huge. I mean, I guess it's the same. If anybody listening to the podcast is like been a smoker, for example, like I have been, it's that delayed gratification thing where it's just like, okay, I know that having a cigarette now will make me feel really good. However, if I quit in 2 weeks time and then a month's time and then 6 months from now, like I'm going to feel amazing and a million times better than if I smoke right now or what have you. I find that delayed gratification stuff really interesting, and drawing that parallel between leadership and people leadership versus something as so snappy as, run a test, it passes, I can ship it and merge the PR, is always really interesting. Something that you mentioned as well in your talk at DevOps Dreaming is, am I respected and am I rewarded
Yeah.
for having folks that are producing their best work, or creating an environment where people can bring their best selves. What are some great ideas for those that might be struggling about what rewarded looks like, or what does rewarded look like? I guess, in your experience of being a manager, what does reward look like to people, and how is that vary?
So I think it actually starts with recognition. So I think a lot of the time, what people want, they care more that someone noticed that they put the hard work in and somebody said something about it than they necessarily do about what they get, right? And so I think there's a great book called The Carrot Principle, which the headline is essentially that thanking people because they deserve it for what they've done rather than in exchange for a future favor is the right thing to do. So altruistic giving is better than sort of transactional giving, if you will. Um, and so I think reward starts with just recognition, with just going, hey, that was great work. I really appreciate it. Like, I'm impressed to see you growing in this way, and that kind of stuff. And so a lot of the time, what people want is that more uh, specific feedback, like positive feedback that they've done well. I think that then when we talk about reward, a lot of time people think about things like bonuses or performance based pay and all of those kinds of things. And I just think that software engineering is such a team sport that anything that anything where you're going to reward, I think it's much safer and better to reward the team rather than individuals. And so I'd much rather give a team a reward of some extra budget so that they can all meet up, because a lot of my teams are very distributed. There, I've got people from like Cape Town to Montreal in my team now, and so some time together or like a meaningful experience together is often what they want more than it doesn't. What matters isn't the 50 quid or whatever that you put on your Pleo card that day for that meetup that you have, or celebration that the team has. The money doesn't matter. The cocktails you buy or whatever don't matter. What matters is the experience that you had with the other people. And so I think we're increasingly finding that it's better to reward teams. A lot of the time, what teams want as a reward is more time together, and to have in-person time together, which has been tough in the last few years. And then I think that the other sort of meta type of reward is more challenge, um, and getting bigger and brighter opportunities to do more stuff, to go into more complexity, or to work across a broader area, or whatever else. And there's a very cynical way of thinking of that, which is, oh yeah, the reward for good work is just more fucking work. And there's really and there's a really positive way to think about that, which is, oh yeah, you do great, and you'll never be bored, because somebody will always find you a new next challenge that you can attack. And I think if you're if your attitude is, oh, I get rewarded for work, for good work with more work to do, then then this might not be the right industry for you, basically, because I
Yeah.
think that is the universal currency of doing well, is that you get more to do.
Yeah, I think that's important what you mentioned. You just got to reframe the idea of what more work means. If you are doing a good job, like you got to, as an employee, detach your own feeling about what work represents and actually what impact work has. So the more work that you get for doing good work, by definition, that work should be more valuable to the company and more valuable to the customers that your company is serving. And I think providing is you as a leader are doing that and making sure that that person is getting the opportunity to do that. Sure, it's more work and it's a probably may in a lot of cases going to be more stressful or slightly tougher or more challenging. That what you're actually doing is valuable as well. I think that's probably the important asterisk to put next to that more work thing, for sure. For sure. What have I missed? What have I not asked you about that you feel is super important in terms of creating a culture that is conducive to amazing teams and amazing work?
So I think the one thing we haven't talked about is values, and uh, I think that values are the kind of facts that underlie, or the behaviors that underlie, a great culture. Because I think when you try to define what culture is, it's really slippery and difficult to define. Right? It's like the way we feel when we work with each other, the things that are okay here and not okay here. Like it's quite amorphous, right? It's difficult to get your hands around it. Whereas I think values are easier to articulate, and to say, these are things we believe in. These are the behaviors that we want to see happen. Um, and just getting clear on whether your values are really shared amongst your leaders, amongst your managers. I think that you see companies sometimes where they've got like a identity crisis inside the company, because the things that are on the walls that they say they believe in, like Enron's values at the point that the Enron crisis happened, were like, they were very lovely things written on walls, but they were not the reality of the culture, right? They were not the real values that were in place. Um, and so I think that sometimes when people start talking about culture, they hit this impasse where they can't really describe what the feeling is that they're going for, and they don't have enough shared ground with other people to have the conversation about culture. And so I suppose in that situation, I encourage people to go, okay, well, what are the underlying values that you're talking about? And is there something that we can agree on there? And then we can talk about where do those values come out in the culture? Like what is a good example of this behavior, and what's a bad example of this behavior, and what do we want to see and not want to see, and that kind of stuff. When I was at Monzo, uh, no credit to me, that the team there did a absolutely fantastic job of articulating what the values were, and then making them so memorable that people used them in everyday language. So they would talk about, I don't think the way that we're running this workshop is in line with a couple of our values, and so we should reconsider it. And it was used in this really brilliant day-to-day way, always, that people would have very real conversations about whether something was being done in a way that was in line with values. Were we encouraging the right behavior? Were we, getting to the culture that we wanted? And at the time, Tom Blomfield, who was still CEO at the time, he said something I really liked, which was that our culture was not going to be a museum piece. It wasn't going to be something that sat in a glass cage and never changed. It was something that was going to have to change. We were going from a team of 300 people to a team of 1,500 people, and that happened in under
Mm.
8 months. And so he said the art of this is going to be making sure that the most important parts of this culture, that we don't lose them, but that we evolve the rest enough that we can keep up with where we are. We don't want to be pretending we're still a 100-person company when we're a 2,000-person company, because that'll never work. And I really like that articulation of it. It's something has stuck with me a lot.
How do you think Monzo got to the point where people would have those kind of conversations about the values in a day-to-day context? So you gave the example of this workshop isn't being run in accordance to our value, these two values that we have. How do you get to that point? And is that something that do you think that's something that has to be embedded from the start, or can gradually shift over time if you place more inherent value on values?
So I think values can evolve. I think at Monzo specifically, the early team, like the founding team, spent a lot of time together talking about what kind of company they wanted to be. And I think that showed a lot. So I think there was a lot of unwritten stuff about what kind of company Monzo was long before the scaling happened, and then it needed to adapt. And then the people team did a fantastic job of basically articulating the values that people held already but didn't have a name for. So they did a really good job of like extracting those values and going, these are the 6 things that we believe, and then putting them everywhere, like putting them on the screens that were down at the lunch area and posters and those kind of things. And so you got to know what they were very easily, and they became a language that was used very frequently around the business. But I think it definitely helped that that early team had done a lot of thinking of, and talked with Jonas Templestein, who's the sort of founder CTO. He's just left after 9 years there, but like he had very strong and very detailed and very well founded opinions about what type of company they should be and what their feedback culture should be and all these kind of things. I've not seen many founders be that deliberate about what kind of company to be. As I saw it at Monzo, it was something that I found really really impressive.
Yeah, that's so interesting to hear you say that. I think that's something that Gearset as well has done quite well. Our co-founders have always run a company that they wanted to run a company and like stood behind everything they believe in. Our CEO is a software engineer by background, and so is our chief product officer, the 2 co-founders of the company. And Gearset has come from a very engineering mindset in the way that they approach problems and the job to be done and all those kind of things, and that unwritten culture that kind of precedes the people team putting the labels on it, but not just putting a label on it for the sake of putting a label on it, deeply understanding why things are the way they are and the way that you think about those problems. I know quite a lot of listeners to this podcast work in smaller teams and smaller startup style environments, things like that. So I think that'll be really helpful for those that are in those kind of situations. Meri, thank you so much. Do you have any closing comments for us, or like a closing like strapline that you would implore to anybody listening, either looking towards management or thinking about culture in their organizations, what they can do day to day to be a better teammate?
Yeah. So the first thing I'd say is don't become a manager unless you really care about people. You can learn all of the skills, but you can't learn to care. So only move into management if you deeply care about people. The second thing I'd say is um, culture can feel a little amorphous, but Kate Houston famously once said, engineers think they don't like process, but the only process they like they call culture, which I think is worth thinking about. Um, and I suppose the other thing I'd say is like really absorb this thing about culture add. So when you're hiring someone, one of the most powerful questions you can ask is, how will this person add to our team, add to our culture? And I would encourage literally everybody to add that question to their debriefs for interviews, because I think it makes you so much more thoughtful about how you're building your team and what the relative strengths and weaknesses are of the people in it, and that's really really valuable as you grow and scale teams. It's a lot harder to add diversity and inclusion late than it is to spend time early and get the initial group to be quite diverse. So then the network that they come with is quite diverse. So this is, a lot of people think, oh, I'll fix that later, and it's so much easier to fix it if you do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, well, that's a classic software engineering principle in itself there. So that's
Yeah,
I feel like that's such an apt way to end it. Meri, thank you so much for spending time with us here on the DevOps Diaries, and thanks to all the listeners that have tuned into this wonderful episode. If you have enjoyed the episodes, be sure to like and subscribe on whatever platform that you happen to be listening on, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, etc. It really helps us out and helps us to bring you amazing content every couple of weeks. Meri, thank you again so much for joining us, and I hope you have a fantastic start to 2024.
brilliant. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.